Hello again and welcome back to our course on PSE 15. In this section I'm going to look at the dodge and burn tools. And what I want to look at is the fact that although I've lightened that picture up quite a bit using a levels adjustment layer, I've also added a brightness and contrast layer. It's now a little bit too light, particularly in the upper parts of the picture. But what I want to do is to show you how to do a bit of targeted lightening and darkening of a picture. The area which is particularly dull now is the grass, the lower left hand quarter of the picture, and also one of the two of the horses that are standing in shadow are quite dark. I can use the dodge tool to lighten something and the burn tool to darken it. Unfortunately, the names dodge and burn don't necessarily remind you which lightens and which darkens. These are names that really relate back to the days when dodging and burning, lightening and darkening were done with chemicals. But if you think of burning as burning the toast when you make your breakfast in the morning, burning is the one that darkens. So I'm going to start with dodging. I'm going to lighten part of the image. Using these tools is actually quite tricky, I find. There are some situations where they work okay, and there's some where they make things look really artificial. What I'm going to do is do a little bit of dodging of the grass here, and you can see the effect on that expanse of grass. The dodge and burn tools are in the enhance group. They're in the bottom right hand corner there. There are three tools. There's the dodge tool, there's the sponge tool that we'll look at later, and then there's the burn tool. So we're going to start with the dodge tool, and we have a brush. We're going to work on the mid-tones. The size of the brush I'm going to tend to have pretty big. I tend to do this in big broad strokes when I'm working on a large area, but it's important, I've found, to have the exposure very low, particularly when you're first trying this, because this is an effect that can easily get out of hand. And a very important point here, we're actually going to brush onto the background copy. We're not going to brush onto one of the adjustment layers. So select the background copy layer and brush onto that. Now, as you can see, that's had a very slight effect. If I did that again, it would start to look as though the grass had frost on it. So it really is something that needs to be done in very low exposure, small strokes. But I think you can see the effect of that lightening. And if you wanted to try this yourself, you might want to try perhaps lightening the flanks of one of those two very dark horses. But in the case of those horses, you'd probably find that you need an even lower exposure setting and even less strokes in order to achieve the effect of just lightening them a little bit. With the burn tool, on the other hand, we're generally trying to dark something that's maybe a little bit over bright, a bit of targeted reduction in something that stands out a little bit too much. In this image, what I'm going to do is tone down that red jacket a little bit. In reality, I'd probably leave it as it is because it's a little bit of a highlight of the picture. But first of all, let's zoom in on it. Now let me select the burn tool. Once again, I don't want a very high exposure setting. I need to set this fairly low as well, certainly at least to try to begin with. And I'm going to use, let me just use the right square bracket to make a slightly bigger brush. Now let me just brush over the back of that jack. Once again, I need to make sure that I have the background copy layer selected, and I think you can see the impact there of the darkening of that jacket. Just want to reduce the brush size a little bit. Now sometimes when you're using these quite subtle effects, you look at them and you think, well, have I made any difference at all? And a good way to see that here would be, as usual, open the history panel and click on the last application of the dodge tool before I started using the burn tool, and we'll see what sort of impact that's had. And as you can see, that's quite a significant impact. So that's the burn tool. And just to demonstrate one other useful technique, if I wanted to darken just this jacket using the burn tool, one option would be to select the jacket first. So Let me go to the Magic Wands tool and select the jacket. This is a good selection for the Magic Wand to make because the colour in the jacket is not replicated anywhere nearby, and so I can make a pretty good selection pretty quickly. If I now go to the burn tool again and maybe choose a really big brush, like a huge, much bigger than the jacket, and click, that will only be applied to the jacket. Let me click again and again and again, and you can see how it's just being applied to the jacket. That's a useful way of targeting burn, and of course you can apply the same principle with dodge as well. That's the end of this section. I'll see you in the next one.